What is a commonplace book? What's their history? What are their benefits? And how can you make one yourself? Those are the questions I'll be answering in today's episode of History Calling as I teach you how to enjoy a popular historical hobby and educational tool and show you something productive you can use an empty notebook for. Because if you're anything like me, you love a good notebook, but you never know what to write in them. Historically speaking, a commonplace book is a handwritten book in which the author collects together information of interest to them under various headings and creates a simple index at the front or back of the book so that the information can be easily located within it and retrieved when desired. It is in essence a mini encyclopedia tailored to the owner's particular interests, and the act of writing in such a book is known as commonplacing. It is different from a diary or journal because the point is not to create new content yourself by writing out a record of what you did in a day or a long narrative of your thoughts on a particular subject, but rather to gather together data from other sources. That being said, you might annotate some of your notes a little. Commonplace books might also include drawings or items stuck into them, such as news clippings, labels, and pictures. In this way, it can overlap to an extent with scrapbooking, but again, the point is to gather up useful and interesting information rather than to create a memory book of events in one's personal life. Another historical name for them was Silva Rerum, meaning forest of things, because of the often eclectic nature of their contents. The history of commonplacing goes back to antiquity and stretches over much of the world. When discussing education, the Greek philosopher Aristotle wrote of the importance of topoi, which translates to topics. These could then be subdivided into other categories. The Roman politician and author Cicero would later advise lawyers to collect together loci communes, meaning common places, by which he meant general information on all sorts of topics that might prove useful in the course of a legal case. According to author Suzanne J. Podhurst, writing in 2008, details of her article are below for you, for the ancients, the practice of commonplacing, quote, facilitated the construction of arguments, trained the memory, and ultimately enhanced an individual's character. It was therefore, quote, not merely morally permissible, but even morally desirable. By the late medieval and early modern periods, commonplacing had become a widely popular practice amongst the literate strata of society and was carried out irrespective of gender. It was still viewed as having educational and personal development benefits, and in 1512 the famed Dutch scholar Desiderius Erasmus advocated for students keeping a commonplace book to help to improve their memories and so that they would become better speakers. Over 200 years later, in 1720, Anglo-Irish author and churchman Jonathan Swift wrote in his advice to a young poet that a commonplace book is what a provident poet cannot subsist without, for this proverbial reason, that, quote, great wits have short memories, end quote, and whereas, on the other hand, poets, being liars by profession, ought to have good memories, to reconcile these, a book of this sort is in the nature of a supplemental memory, or a record of what occurs remarkable in every day's reading or conversation. There you enter not only your own original thoughts, which 100 to 1 are few and insignificant, but such of other men as you think fit to make your own, by entering them there. Modern author Lucia Dacombe, details of her 2004 article, which I'm about to quote from, are given below, provides the following summary of their perceived value in 18th century Britain. The practice of commonplacing similarly came to be regarded as capable of bringing together the order of learning and the methodizing of one's thoughts, the pursuit of self-improvement and the fashioning of the polite individual. While collecting and ordering notes and thoughts, compilers also worked on their own intellectual, moral, and social edification. The books continued to be widely used throughout the 19th century and into the 20th, and some very famous individuals are known to have kept them, including the US President Thomas Jefferson. They pop up in fiction too. Sherlock Holmes had one in a story published as late as 1927 called The Adventure of the Veiled Lodger. However, over the ensuing decades, they gradually fell out of popular use, presumably because as print media became more and more abundant, it became easier to simply buy books or magazines on topics that interested one, rather than compiling one's own little encyclopedia. By 1956, one author writing in the Times newspaper asked, "Do many people keep commonplace books nowadays?" They have never ceased to be used entirely, though, and still make appearances in fictional works too. If you've ever read the All Souls series by Deborah Harkness, which became the TV show A Discovery of Witches, you'll know that the second book is set largely in Elizabethan England, where the protagonist, Diana Bishop, is given a commonplace book by her sort of husband, Matthew de Clermont. They're not actually really married at that point yet. Diana struggles a little bit at first to know what to do with it, despite being a time-travelling historian, but have no fear if this is a hobby you'd like to take up for yourself, because later in the video I'll talk you through setting up your own one, including what you'll need to get started and some ideas for what you could commonplace about. I've also linked the All Souls / Discovery of Witches books and TV show below for you. Many historical commonplace books were written purely for the use of the author and exist in manuscript form only. Here, for instance, you can see a 17th century English commonplace book in which the author has recorded recipes, and another from 1811 in which the compiler has recorded traffic crossing Blackfriars Bridge in London. By the by, if you're interested in getting better at reading historical handwriting like this, you might want to check out my video all about that topic, which I'll leave linked on screen and below for you. Other commonplace books were polished up by their authors or later owners and published. Here is one example from the commonplace book of the 18th and early 19th century English poet Robert Southey, which was later edited by his son-in-law. Southey recorded information on all kinds of subjects, and if you read the contents list, you can get an idea of the scope of the book. Then there's this one from 1836 by English mathematician Olynthus Gregory, with the very long-winded title Mathematics for Practical Men, being a commonplace book of principles, theorems, rules and tables in various departments of pure and mixed mathematics, with their application especially to the pursuit of surveyors, architects, mechanics and civil engineers. I chose this page on weights and measures to show you because I was at least able to follow what it said, which I can't do for most of the rest of the book. I'm an historian after all, not a mathematician. There were, and still are, various ways to organise one's notes. The simplest is a list of subject headings with page numbers next to them, indicating which page in the book includes information on that topic. You could also have this list on a separate sheet tucked into the main book so that it can be easily changed and updated, then copy a final alphabetised list into the front or back of the book when it is otherwise full. You just have to be sure to leave enough blank pages for this final index to be added in. Of course, the downside is that information on a particular topic can appear all over your notebook and not just in one area of it. For commonplace books dedicated to one broad theme, authors might prefer to have a list of headings entered into the book before they even start commonplacing. For example, in 1557, John Foxe published Locorum Communium, which was just a book of nearly blank pages with theological headings on them to assist in organising one's notes around that theme. Here you see an example from a 1572 edition where the buyer has started to fill in some of the pages. This wasn't a perfect system, mind you, and if I show you a run of pages in this book, you can see that many remained almost or entirely blank, save for the heading, an unfortunate waste of paper in an era when books were expensive items. Michael Stolberg, writing in 2014, explained the systematic or textbook approach, which is very similar to that just outlined, except that the commonplacers themselves select and write in the headings before starting to record information under them. In this case, the author, quote, "fill the empty pages with headings that reflected a systematic, logical division of a given subject area, like the chapters of a textbook. In fact, the headings were sometimes copied verbatim from the table of contents of a successful textbook, and the writer might start by entering excerpts from that book under the various headings." Stolberg points out that this method is limited in what it can do and is best used for students of a very particular subject. It falters as soon as the writer wants to make notes on topics which don't match any of the preordained headings, and it forces them into just repeating knowledge already published and organised in the same way elsewhere, so that you might as well just own the book or books that you copied the headings out of in the first place. Organising notes alphabetically, with pages assigned a letter of the alphabet in advance or even as the writer goes along, is similarly inflexible. For when the contents cannot be predicted beforehand, what happens if you run out of space under the letter B, for instance, but then there's additional information on a B topic that you want to include? Or what if you leave a blank page for additional information, but then end up never using it? It's a waste of space and paper, and would really only be useful if you were creating your commonplace book out of loose sheets in a binder, where you could slot new pages in as you went. In that case, though, you wouldn't be able to number them and would be left unable to index until your book was complete. It wouldn't even have been an option for people operating in a time before the handy ring binder was invented. They'd have had nothing better than a card catalogue, which can't be easily carried around and misses the whole point of a commonplace book because there is no book. A more complex but more flexible method was invented by the English philosopher John Locke, who lived from 1632 until 1704. Having apparently spent decades commonplacing and refining his method for doing so and organising the contents of his notebooks, in 1686 the French Bibliothèque Universelle published his new method of compiling collections, to give the name in English. This was later translated into English and published posthumously in 1706 under the title A New Method of Making Commonplace Books. In both publications, he explained his new and, he said, improved indexing method. This involved a double spread of pages at the start of the book on which he would draw out a grid divided up into a total of 4 vertical columns, 2 on each page, and 25 horizontal lines. The lines were in groups of 5, and each group was assigned one letter of the alphabet, then subdivided into one line each for the 5 vowels. There were no groups for the letters J, K, and Y. Instead, the letters I, C, and U would be used in their place, and W was spliced in with V. Words starting with a Q always have a U after them in English, so the Q group in inverted commas would only need one line instead of 5, and Locke liked to put that into the slot which would otherwise have been for the ZU words, noting that it was very rare to come across ZU words anyway. I know you're going to ask me why there's a number 1 before the vowels in each case, and honestly, I didn't totally understand the point of this myself, but I think it has to do with if you run out of space in this double page index, you can have a second index on another page, and then presumably there would be a number 2 just before the vowels there to indicate you're on index 2. This is just a best guess on my part though, because really, Locke didn't explain it very well, and as you can see from this example, some people opted not to do it, so I think you could just ignore it if you want to. It was also possible to make other little tweaks to this system if you liked, which is why this index has both V and W sections. In rare cases where a word has no vowel after the initial letter, like the word oil, it can be indexed according to its first letter twice over. So oil would go into the letter O group and then be put in the subsection for the vowel O as well. This is actually a moderately complicated indexing system, despite being called easy in the 1706 translation, and it works better in some cases than in others. In particular, it's probably more useful if the commonplace book in question is dedicated to one overarching theme, like the natural world. Otherwise, you end up with references to wildly different topics appearing next to each other in the index, and you have to sift through them all looking for the pages which relate to the keyword you're interested in. For instance, in this system, if you were looking for references to Elizabeth I, but also had entries on emigration and epigrams, you'd need to sift through them all as they'd all be listed under the EI section of the index. You'd be even more annoyed if, having done all that, you realised you'd actually listed Queen Elizabeth under Tudor and needed to start the whole process again with the TU section. Authors of 18th and 19th century commonplace books knew that it wasn't perfect as well, and over the decades some tried to improve on Locke's method. In 1799, J. Walker in London published A New Commonplace Book, being an improvement on that recommended by Mr. Locke, and in 1839 in New York there was an advertisement for a book entitled Locke's Commonplace Book, Altered and Improved, in which the various defects found in the author's original plan are fully obviated. Still, the initial Lockean method remains in use today, and if you look up YouTube videos made by people who commonplace, you will hear some of them talking about it as their preferred indexing method. So now let's discuss how to create your own commonplace book and take up this historical hobby for yourself. All you'll need is a blank notebook, whether lined, unlined or otherwise, it doesn't matter as long as you're happy with it, plus a pen or pencil. Next, decide if your index is going at the front or back and set it up. You can use the Lockean method if you want, or any of the others mentioned here. Personally, I just went for something very basic in mine and drew 2 columns at the back of my book, one for subjects and one for page numbers. When I write about the same topics, the pieces of information won't always appear near each other in the book, but I don't mind having it be a bit chaotic and eclectic. It's actually part of the appeal in my case. I also like having the index at the back of the book so that I can extend it across as many pages as I need until I meet the information I'm adding in from the front. Make sure the lines in your index aren't too close together so that you can fit the page numbers in as you go along, and then number the rest of the pages in your book if it didn't come with numbers. That's it. You're now ready to start commonplacing. You might want to decide at the outset if your book is a miscellany of random, unconnected information, or if there's a unifying theme in the way that there was in the literary and mathematical examples I showed you earlier. As for what you can commonplace about, whether it's in one book of miscellaneous information or in a series of books that each have a particular theme, this is entirely up to you, but I do have some suggestions to help get you going. You might record quotations, news items, prayers, information to do with gardening, travel, literature, artworks, cooking, historical facts, I very much approve of that one of course, car maintenance, astronomy, plane spotting, song lyrics, new words you've learnt, great YouTube videos you watched, skincare, movies, TV shows, or anything else that takes your fancy. You can also draw in it and stick in clippings from newspapers or magazines so that it's a bit of a mashup between a commonplace book and a scrapbook. It's really entirely up to you. There is no right or wrong way to do this, and if you want to combine ancient technology with modern, you can photograph your commonplace book to create a backup. If you want to keep it particularly nice, you can also jot down notes in your phone first, then transfer them over in your good handwriting at a later time. When you've filled one book, start another. I've left a few links in the description box for notebooks you can buy from Amazon, but really anything will do and you don't need to spend big money on this. If you don't like or are unable to write by hand for any reason, you can also create a digital commonplace book in inverted commas by doing something as simple as using the Note app on your phone or creating a text file on your computer. These options will probably also allow you to use the dictation software on these devices so that you don't even have to type the information, though my phone always struggles to understand my accent. In these cases, an index is likely not needed as you can run digital searches for words. If you are able to write though, I recommend it. Commonplacing is an inherently analogue hobby in my opinion, so if you want to commonplace in the way that our ancestors did, get out your pen and paper. As well as being cheap and generally easy to do, there are tons of other benefits to this hobby as well. It makes you an active reader and listener when you consume content and helps you to retain information by writing it down. It also makes you compare and contrast different ideas and improves your critical thinking. This is particularly useful in the study of history, where so often people just believe the first thing they hear or read about a topic without bothering to do further research and see what other writers and commentators have to say on the matter. It's easier to commit to than a diary because there isn't the expectation that you'll write in it every day, so you won't experience the guilt I used to have when I'd look at all the days I'd missed in my diary, which I don't keep anymore. I think you're also more likely to go back and read your commonplace book than you are with a diary or journal. If you're writing it by hand, it also improves your handwriting and even your spelling because you're going more slowly and not relying on spell checker. And it's wonderful for getting you off your screens and doing something a little bit slower and more meditative. It can be a great conversation starter too if you take your notebook with you in your pocket or bag and someone sees you commonplacing whilst out and about. You'll also have something nice at the end of it to put on your shelf and a sense of achievement at all the knowledge you've gathered up. Plus, you can combine it with another hobby or even your job. For example, I might commonplace about good YouTube tips and strategies, or had I thought of it earlier because I only just started this hobby, I could have commonplaced about how to self-publish on Amazon, which is something I did recently. I'll leave my book, Find Your Irish Ancestors Online, linked below for you. I actually did keep notes about how to do that, plus marketing strategies that I picked up from watching tutorials about that topic. One of them was to keep promoting it in your later content like I'm doing right now, but they aren't organised in a Commonplace book, which is a bit of a shame. I hope you enjoyed that deep dive into the world and history of commonplacing. Please remember to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel with the notification bell switched on to never miss any of my content going forwards. If you'd like perks and bonus material from me, you can join my YouTube membership by clicking the join button underneath videos or on my homepage, or you can find me over on Patreon, where I share even more extras including early access to ad-free videos and mini podcasts. This week, for instance, I'll be telling my historical figure and time traveller patrons what I put in my Commonplace book. You can also join my mailing list too on my website, historycallingofficial.com, and get 2 free downloads. All the links you'll need are in the description box. And I'd also like to say thank you to those of you who support the channel by making one-off donations using the thanks button underneath videos. Let me know below if I've tempted you to take up this hobby, or if you already do it, and what kind of topics you might be interested in commonplacing about. Until next time all, you might want to use your Commonplace book to help you to keep learning.